You ever get really excited for an upcoming wrestling match and it turns out to be a disappointment? Like, you get this idea in your head about how it's going to play out and you imagine it being this huge match of the year contender and it ends up under-delivering in a massive way. Yeah, it's a pretty common occurrence, unfortunately. Some wrestling matches have sensational build-ups that make the showdown feel like a must-see clash. Some matches may feature veterans of yesteryear, and the idea of them coming back for one more battle sounds extremely interesting. Other times, a storyline's been going on for so long that the inevitable pay-per-view match can seemingly never be bad. But there's plenty of times these kind of matches fail to deliver, and that's what we'll be looking at today. Great performers, great storylines, great build-ups, and great expectations ruined by an underwhelming match. I like to point out obvious choices when starting these kind of videos, so here goes. Sting vs Hollywood Hogan, Starrcade 97. You guys who watch my stuff know the story because it's been brought up so many times. But for those unaware, Sting vs Hollywood Hogan had a near 18-month build-up, which was made even more interesting thanks to WCW not booking Sting in any matches during this time period. This was set to be the ultimate WCW vs NWO match. The New World Order storyline itself had done incredible numbers for WCW, and Starrcade 97 broke every pay-per-view record up until that point because everyone wanted to see this showdown, and they blew it. They really blew it. Fans wanted to see Sting explode and they wanted to see Hogan finally get his comeuppance, but not only did Hogan control most of the match, he also covered Sting and got a clean 1-2-3 from referee Nick Patrick. This was supposed to be a fast count and the match would get restarted by Bret Hart, but the count was absolutely fine and the match getting restarted made no sense. In the end, Sting still left the event holding the WCW Championship, but the whole thing fell apart after the entrances, and Starrcade 97 lives on as one of the biggest fumbles in pro wrestling history.
It's hell getting to heaven.
When it was announced that Shawn Michaels was coming out of retirement for a tag team match in Saudi Arabia, fans got pretty excited, especially those who watched pro wrestling during the 90s. HBK was going to team up with his DX comrade Triple H to take on the Brothers of Destruction, so this had the potential to be a nostalgia-filled trip down memory lane as older fans got to relive the glory days of the Attitude Era. Unfortunately, the match turned out to be absolutely terrible and it was quite a bitter pill to swallow too. Shawn Michaels ended up performing better than everyone else involved, but it quickly fell apart when Triple H suffered a torn pec early in the bout. The retired HBK had to carry the match for DX, while Undertaker and Kane evidently weren't really up for the challenge. The part where Kane's mask accidentally falls off just sums up the whole match really. The whole thing should be considered a giant mistake, and old school fans quickly realised that some memories are best left alone. I know I don't speak for everyone here, but I was actually pretty excited to see Goldberg vs Brock Lesnar square off at WrestleMania 20. Goldberg was Raw's beast, while Lesnar served as SmackDown's beast, and these two were set to collide at the biggest show of the year after they crossed paths at the 2004 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. There were two big issues with this one really. First of all, word got around that Goldberg and Lesnar were leaving the WWE following this match, so the New York audience who attended Madison Square Garden for Mania 20 absolutely shit on both competitors. Both men got booed loudly, and special referee Stone Cold Steve Austin got cheered more than the men competing in the match. Secondly, the way the match was laid out was terrible. Early on, they went for the irresistible force meeting the immovable object thing where neither man would give an inch, but this provided fans with a bunch of long, drawn-out tie-ups that made MSG boo even more. If they went at it in a no-holds-barred smash-mouth style while beating the absolute crap out of each other, then they could have salvaged something. But no, they started off extremely slowly and they struggled to win the crowd back afterwards. It's one of those matches that could have been more, but unfortunately it brought Mania 20 way down. Thankfully the show was lifted up again and things got back on track, but this is one match I'm sure both Goldberg and Brock Lesnar would like to forget. Speaking of Brock Lesnar, anyone remember the Beast versus the Lunatic Fringe at WrestleMania 32? God, I hate that name, Lunatic Fringe. But yeah, that one didn't play out how fans envisioned. Here you have Brock Lesnar, the unstoppable beast of WWE, going up against what should have been a formidable opponent in Dean Ambrose thanks to Dean's unpredictability. Many superstars tried to out-wrestle Brock, they tried to overpower him, but more times than not, Lesnar would make extremely easy work of his opponents, and it's made clear that beating Brock Lesnar takes an extra something to get the job done right. Ambrose had that extra something. His ring style was very unorthodox, he was a little crazy, and his lack of fear made him a great opponent for the Beast. The match they had at Mania was so underwhelming that even Steve Austin tore Dean a new one over it live on the WWE Network. It was so awkward seeing the WWE Champion sit there and take a verbal lashing from one of the true icons of the company, and even Paul Heyman spoke about Dean's poor attitude surrounding this match. Ambrose put the blame on Lesnar. He said Brock was lazy and he didn't want to do anything in this match. Brock was also getting prepared for a UFC fight against Mark Hunt while this WWE match took place, and it's been rumoured that Brock didn't want to get hurt or overdo it at WrestleMania. Essentially, whether it's Brock or Ambrose or the company, these are all excuses for a bad match, and we shouldn't be seeing bad matches at WrestleMania. Watch it back and you will be saying to yourself, was that it? It's a paint-by-numbers Brock Lesnar match that you'll watch once and never again. What about Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Perfect? Sounds great on paper, doesn't it? These two collided at SummerSlam 93, the build-up began back at WrestleMania 9, and you immediately think of this fast-paced, athletic match that has the potential to steal any show it's placed on. Thing is, both HBK and Kurt Hennig were masters at making their opponents look good. They were great sellers who bumped around the ring to make the other guys look strong. So you've got two guys here with very similar ring styles and ring philosophies, and it just didn't work. The finish was bad too. This one was contested for the IC title and HBK retained the championship after a countout. So not only did these two struggle when meshing their similar ring styles together, they also killed the crowd a little by giving fans a flat finish. Shawn Michaels wrote the following in his book. On paper, Kurt and I should have a great match. We were both great workers and we like wrestling each other. The only problem was our styles didn't mesh. What we both did best was bring out the best in our opponents. Being dominant was something neither of us felt comfortable doing. My best offense was getting beat up all the time. His was getting backdropped or thrown into the turnbuckle. It's strange, but two great wrestlers don't always equal a great match. We only went 10 minutes. I won via countout after Kevin threw him into the ring post. Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles had a fantastic match at Wrestle Kingdom 10, one of my favourite matches from both men. Expectations were extremely high when these two got booked for a match at WrestleMania 34 2 years later, and honestly it was one of the main reasons why I wanted to attend WrestleMania that year. It's one of those matches you watch back and you just wonder why it turned out the way it did. While both competitors showed a lot of urgency in the Wrestle Kingdom match and while both men pulled out all the stops while wrestling in Japan, it almost feels like they were told to intentionally not wrestle as good in New Orleans because it's like watching two completely different competitors. The atmosphere was weird in the audience too. AJ and Nakamura had the crowd for the first few minutes, but the excitement quickly died down and it felt like the match was dragging on a bit. Hard to explain, but I remember feeling very disappointed when it was over. The WWE also turned Nakamura heel after the match. He punched AJ in the balls, and this ball abuse would continue on for weeks, if not months. So we went from an epic battle for the ages in New Japan to guys guarding their nuts every week in WWE. It's not great. Check out the Tokyo Dome match if you haven't seen it before though. A quick Google search and you can see the whole thing. Triple H versus Big Papa Pump Scotty Steiner. It's kinda sad that many fans only know Steiner from his lackluster WWE run or for his admittedly brilliant Steiner math promo because, let me tell you something brother, once upon a time Scotty Steiner could really go, and his unbelievable strength mixed with his ridiculous athleticism made him a seriously entertaining in-ring performer. When Scott turned heel in WCW to join the New World Order, he made a conscious decision to change his moveset. He decided to eliminate moves that made fans pop because he wanted people to boo him. He also gained an insane amount of upper body weight made up of pure muscle, so even fans who got into wrestling in the middle of the Monday Night Wars didn't necessarily see Scott at his absolute best. Still, Big Papa Pump got himself a main event world championship match against Triple H at the 2003 Royal Rumble, and it wasn't good. So bad was Scott's performance here that reportedly a planned rematch at WrestleMania 19 between The Game and Scott Steiner was cancelled, and the company went in a different direction. Now, Scott has since revealed that during this match he was dealing with drop food, and with this in mind you kinda see why there were so many botches in the matchup, but the crowd completely turned on Scott here, and it's one of the rare times when Triple H using a sledgehammer to cause a DQ finish actually gets cheered. It's kinda sad too because, as stated, Scott Steiner was a premier performer, and a mid-90s Scott Steiner would out-wrestle Triple H any day of the week. That wasn't the case at Royal Rumble 2003 though, and Scott's main event push would end after one more title match against Hunter the following month at No Way Out. Bret Hart vs Sting was a dream match for many people, and WCW decided to book this dream match at Halloween Havoc 98. The story writes itself really. You of course have the Sharpshooter versus Scorpion Deathlock thing going on, but both men's names respectively preceded them in terms of their legendary status, and you didn't need anything more than a simple story centered around who's the best. Both Bret and Sting were in strange, unfamiliar parts of their careers though when they met at this pay-per-view match. Sting had joined the NWO Wolfpack while Bret was named the recruiter for NWO Black and White. Bret was also determined to severely injure anyone who stepped in the ring with him, which is something I actually enjoyed, but this wasn't the Sting vs Bret match as fans would have imagined just a year prior. Now, in saying all this, it's still hard not to get excited for a Bret Hart vs Sting match, no matter what the circumstances surrounding it. As mentioned, these two are legends of the business, and it's a marquee match no matter what kind of WCW bullshit's going on in the background. But the match itself didn't play up to neither man's strong points. It's not terrible, but it is disappointing because it should have been so much more. The finish wasn't good either. Bret decided to attack Sting with the Icon's own baseball bat, and Sting got knocked out cold. Bret won after applying the Sharpshooter to an unresponsive Sting, and Sting would then disappear from WCW, meaning a rematch wouldn't happen until late '99. I could actually name more matches from Halloween Havoc that failed to deliver, even though they sounded interesting on paper. Mainly Scott Hall vs Kevin Nash and Hollywood Hogan vs Ultimate Warrior. Funnily enough, all three of these matches happened one after another on the pay-per-view, so yeah, not a great night for WCW.
Mamacita. Viva la raza.
Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit had some great matches in the past while wrestling for WCW and New Japan. All those guys like Guerrero, Benoit, Malenko, Mysterio, Chavo and Jericho knew each other so well that they were always one or two moves ahead in the ring, and it made for some incredibly good matches. Benoit and Guerrero meeting again at ECW's One Night Stand 2005 had an added element to it though, an ECW throwback element that maybe made some fans think Eddie and Chris were going to get a little gritty with this one, a little more intense maybe than their previous WWE encounters. Thing is, Eddie Guerrero went into this one looking visibly pissed off, and his performance on this evening was not representative of Latino hate at all. Rumour has it that Eddie wasn't happy with losing clean at the end of the bout, seeing as he was in the middle of a rivalry with Rey Mysterio, and it was also reported that Eddie and Chris had a heated argument after the match, though this was never confirmed. Others have stated that Eddie was angry with fans chanting for the Raw and SmackDown superstars who were sitting on the balcony. Some say both men expected a lot more out of each other, and Benoit too got pissed off when it seemed like Eddie wasn't wrestling as good as what he could. No matter what was going on though, the end result was a match that didn't live up to expectations, which does suck because these two were capable of a lot more. You can even see Eddie say, "I owe you one" to Benoit after the match. Here's one you don't see mentioned too often in this manner, but I challenge you to go back, watch it, and tell me I'm wrong. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs Undertaker at In Your House Rock Bottom. Now, it's no big secret that Austin and Taker didn't really mesh all that well, even though their rivalry dominated a fair portion of the Attitude Era. For some reason or another, their pay-per-view encounters didn't live up to expectations, though the matches they had against each other on Raw were always decent. That being said, this one at Rock Bottom got a lot of fan interest because it was a Buried Alive match. The second Buried Alive match in WWE history, as a matter of fact. The Mankind vs Undertaker Buried Alive match was very intriguing, and the WWF pulled it off quite well, what with the action inside the ring before the grand finale. All the bad boys came out to bury Taker and his hand rose up from the grave. It was a pretty good match for sure, and we always expect bigger things from the sequel, but again, go back and watch Austin vs Undertaker and you'll be surprised by how little actually happens in this match. It's filled to the brim with shortcuts. There's loads of brawling around the ring and around the graveside, but it's not even good brawling. It's pretty much punches, kicks, fighting in the audience, using the guardrails, using the ring steps, that kind of stuff. The in-ring action's kept to an absolute minimum, and like many matches in this video, it feels more lackluster because the competitors are much more capable than what's being presented. The guy driving the digger at the end also didn't get his license, and Austin becomes irate when the Undertaker's burial goes on way longer than it should. And in the end, Austin has to pick up a shovel and do some digging while the referee just calls for the bell to end the whole thing with a little bit of mercy. I know brawls have their place in wrestling, I know we all enjoy watching a good scrap, but this scrap wasn't very good, and no matter how much you like Austin and Undertaker, you have to admit when things could be better.
Broken out in love.
Everyone got really excited when The Fiend got himself a Universal title match against Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell 2013. Not only did it feel like WWE was going to listen to fans and give The Fiend a main event run with a main WWE Championship title, but this match was going to take place inside the Hell in a Cell itself, a match type that seemingly fit Bray Wyatt's alter ego to a T. The Fiend had dominated Finn Balor at SummerSlam a month prior, and his subsequent attacks on Seth Rollins made it feel like he was truly unstoppable. But it turned out all it took to stop The Fiend was a referee ending the match prematurely, and this, my friends, was a major mistake. Seth Rollins ended up dumping all sorts of weapons on top of The Fiend, and he proceeded to hit this pile of weapons with a sledgehammer. The referee thought it was all too much and he stopped the match before it ended. And you have to remember, this is Hell in a Cell, anything goes, and the only way to win the match is via pinfall or submission. So why the WWE felt it was a good idea to stop the match due to excessive violence was not only beyond me, but it was beyond every person inside the Golden One Center in Sacramento, California. The easy thing to say would be the finish protected Bray Wyatt, but it really didn't. The Fiend needed the referee to stop the match before he got permanently injured by Seth Rollins, who, by the way, entered this match as a babyface, but by the end of it he was getting booed out of the building. Fans chanted AEW after the bout, they chanted refunds, and even though The Fiend was able to eventually win the Universal Championship, this match at Hell in a Cell is seen as an incredible misstep that could have potentially killed the character for good. Seth Rollins has talked about the match. He said he was incredibly angry with the finish and he warned folks beforehand that fans wouldn't like it, but nobody listened, and a match that had so much potential now gets remembered for how dumb the finish was. Here's a match that I still kinda like, but I also admit it should have been more considering the guys in the ring. Bret Hart versus the second Tiger Mask at Wrestling Summit 1990, or Bret Hart versus Mitsuharu Misawa. Now you guys know that Japanese wrestling isn't my forte, but Misawa's story is really something special. I highly recommend seeking out Kim Justice's video, which goes into Misawa's career in great depth, and I guarantee you'll have a great newfound appreciation for this bona fide legend of pro wrestling. Anyway, Misawa wrestled as the second generation Tiger Mask after Giant Baba purchased the rights to the character's likeness. And when you learn that Misawa and Bret the Hitman Hart had a match during a WWF New Japan and All Japan Super Show, you instantly want to check it out because it's almost guaranteed to be a wrestling clinic. Hold your horses though, because that's not really the case. No idea what happened here, and I don't know if Bret was tired from the travel or if there's communication issues in the ring, but rather than being a technical masterpiece, this one falls flat as it goes to a 20-minute time limit draw. It's an absolute chinlock fest that Davey Boy Smith would be proud of. In saying that, I still like the match because it's just so insane to me that the match actually took place, but it's also a shame that these two just didn't have chemistry and the match turns out to be pretty poor. I've also read that Misawa was coming off knee surgery, so keep that in mind too. And for the record, Bret stated in his book that Misawa wasn't as good as the original Tiger Mask, but he also admitted Misawa had big shoes to fill. Bret also made it clear he didn't like working in Japan and he wasn't a fan of the stiffer Japanese ring style, so that could have been a factor too. Valuable as hell for its historical significance though, and again, it's awesome that the match took place, no matter how bad it may have turned out. Finally, it's Randy Orton versus Triple H at WrestleMania 25. The build-up to this one was done pretty well, I thought, with the storyline being deeply personal. Randy Orton hitting Stephanie with a DDT, the legend killer then giving Stephanie a kiss while Triple H was handcuffed, Triple H getting some revenge by breaking into Randy's home and throwing him through the window. As far as build-ups go, it was all pretty much on point, and hopefully all these elements would come together at WrestleMania to give fans a memorable matchup between the two former Evolution teammates. What fans got instead was Triple H completely decimating Randy from bell to bell, more or less, and it didn't even seem all that competitive. I mean, they could have used Stephanie in the match somehow, they could have utilised Randy's legacy stable in one way or another, anything for a little plot twist in the middle of the match, seeing as it was so deeply rooted in Hunter's relationship with Stephanie. But bizarrely, the WWE decided to instead have Triple H beat the shit out of Randy for the final match of WrestleMania, and it was boring. Keep in mind too that Shawn Michaels and Undertaker had what many consider to be the greatest WrestleMania match of all time on this card. Triple H and Randy Orton needed to do something extra special to make it a bit more memorable, but instead it's a 25-minute slog and I think we all expected a lot more. Anytime I watch WrestleMania 25, I always stop before this match begins. Even the John Cena, Edge and Big Show triple threat match that went on before it is much more entertaining. You guys know the drill, share more in the comment section below, and if there's enough suggestions we can always visit this topic again for round 2. Maybe you don't agree with some of my choices, maybe you can add your own reasons why some of these matches didn't turn out exactly how we thought they would. Whatever the case, fill up that comment section with your thoughts and ideas because I love reading through them when a new video gets uploaded. Thanks for watching as always, and please take care.